My mirror clouds quite easily. Though I warm it, it still does not capture my true self. Namo Buddhist. Namo The BWA, Buddhist Women's Association, I'll call them BWA a lot, has supported and encouraged annual memorials to bring the stories of Lady Takeko Kujo and Lady Yoshiko Ohtani, not only to their members, but also to the wider Sangha, so everyone hears their stories. Lady Kujo, born Takeko Ohtani in 1887, was the youngest daughter of Koso Ohtani, the 21st Monshu, or head priest of the Nishi Hongwanji-ha, and she's the one sitting in front of her in these lovely Edwardian dresses here. She's the one sitting. It's said that she was the favorite child of her father. She was raised at the head temple in Kyoto. For reasons that are not clear, at least not to me, maybe people who can find information in Japanese know, she was raised apart from her mother, Fujiko Matsubara, although it is known that she spent some time with her after she had grown up. So she was still alive for sure. When Takeko was 5 years old, her future sister-in-law, Kazuko Kujo, came to live at the Hongwanji, and that's the lovely lady standing behind her. Although Kazuko was only 10 years old when she arrived, she was already betrothed to Takeko's oldest brother, Kozui, who was just 16 at the time, and destined to become the next Monshu. Kazuko had come to learn about Buddhism and how to fulfill the role that she would one day take on as the wife of the Gomonshu. She and Takeko would become very close, like sisters. And I think you can almost tell here how close they are. Later, when the Russo-Japanese War broke out in 1904, the two of them would start a women's organization to provide care packages for soldiers and support families who had lost loved ones in the conflict. It soon developed into the Buddhist Women's Organization, or Bukkyo Fujinkai, that we're familiar with today. Kazuko, who was by then the wife of the young new Gomonshu, her husband had succeeded his father, served as the president of the BWA, traveling and promoting the concept of the Women's Association, while Takeko took care of the administrative tasks at the head temple in Kyoto. In 1909, Takeko married Kazuko's brother, Baron Yoshimune Kujo, and there seems to be some confusion in the English accounts whether it is the English Yoshimune or Yoshimasa. So if anybody knows for sure the proper pronunciation of his name, let me know. And yes, you heard that correctly, understood that correctly. Takeko married Kazuko's brother, and Kazuko married Takeko's brother. So they were sort of double sisters-in-law, which seems very strange, but I actually have that happened in my family a couple generations back. They even had a double wedding. So it's common here in the early years of the century, or at least somewhat common. The newlyweds moved first to Tokyo, and then they soon went to England, where Baron Kujo studied at Cambridge University for a time, and then he took a position with the London branch of the Yokohama Specie Bank, which was instrumental in Japanese foreign trade, and he had worked for them, I think, for a bit in Japan, but probably they had a program, I'm guessing, to get them into the university and learn the ways of the British Empire so they could be effective. Takeko's brother, the Gomonshu, and Kazuko also came to England to join them for a time. I just found that out and researched this last few days, and I was really surprised that, yes, the Gomonshu and his wife were up there for quite a while. After residing in England for about a year, Takeko, with Kazuko, spent time visiting countries on the European continent, researching and touring girls' schools and colleges. So they actually didn't just do the grand tour, they actually had a task they were trying to accomplish, understanding how education for girls and women was working in Europe. They then returned to Japan without Baron Kujo. He would remain in England for an additional 10 years. After their return to Japan, Takeko and Kazuko, with the financial support of the Buddhist Women's Association, requested that the Hongwanji support their plans to build a women's university in Kyoto. Sadly, Kazuko became ill not very long after their return and passed away in 1911. And that's an important point in Takeko's life. Up until then, they had been partners in crime, so to speak. They would have plans, have things they wanted to see done, and they would work together as a team to make them happen. On her own, Takeko continued to advocate for the creation of a Jodo Shinshu Women's University, but it would take until 1920 to establish Kyoto Women's High School, which would later become Kyoto Women's College in 1949. Separated from her husband and having lost the close companionship of her sister-in-law, Takeko coped with loneliness and grief by immersing herself in work and the study of poetry. And here she's being interviewed. She still looks pretty young here. She was a little bit of a celebrity, I can tell, because there's pictures of her with crowds of people and being interviewed and so on. So she was considered one of the great beauties of the age, and was pretty visible publicly. I think kind of a little bit of a star. And this was during the 20s, and you start to see more media, just as you do in the West. So she coped with her loneliness and grief by immersing herself in work and poetry. She studied poetry with a well-known scholar and poet, and worked intensely at it. She would go on to publish 3 volumes of poetry in her lifetime, plus a stage play and short essays, and an autobiography was published posthumously. So she must have begun it. I don't know who would have finished and prepared it for publishing, but she must have begun it. In 1920, Takeko's husband returned to Japan, and thereafter they lived together in Tokyo. So he returned and they reunited. I just like this picture. The Great Kanto quake struck in September of 1923, devastating Tokyo and Yokohama, and a wider area, but those 2 cities were truly devastated. And I think in some years past I described the scope of that quake, and it's truly astounding still every time I see statistics. The Tsukiji Hongwanji temple was burned, thousands were injured, and maybe as many as 1.5 million people were left homeless in the region. Takeko threw herself into relief work. She worked to raise funds to rebuild the Tsukiji temple. In 1925, the Hongwanji established a free medical clinic for the poor. When the clinic lost its funding, Takeko raised funds to keep it operating and donated the royalties from her book of poetry, Muryuge, to fund and expand the clinic into a hospital. And as a result, Shoka Hospital was established in 1930. And I like this photo too. I'm not sure where she is in here. I think she's in Japan. While performing this relief work, Takeko developed blood poisoning and died of sepsis on February 7, 1928, at the age of 40 by Western reckoning. And that's why we honor her memory in February, because that's the month of her passing. I find Lady Kujo a very compelling figure, and it's always interesting to research her. New stuff seems to pop up on the web every year in English. I'm sure there's much more information in Japanese, but for me it's trying to find bits and pieces in English. She was amazingly energetic and dedicated, and she really, I think, achieved a tremendous amount in her short lifetime. She's much remembered and admired for her philanthropic work. I think that's what she's known most widely for in Japan. And living out her Buddhist values as she worked to further education for women, to care for the poor, the sick, and the injured, to rebuild from a devastating natural disaster. But I think also that people identify with the many losses that she suffered and the positive ways that she struggled to overcome those losses. I know I do. She wasn't close to her mother, wasn't raised with her mother. Her mother didn't care for her apparently when she was a young child. Her father died in 1903, and so she was still in her late mid-teens when she lost her father. It was kind of a strict upbringing in the confines of the temple. And then her marriage didn't work out too well. 10 years, she only had a year with her husband before he was like, nah, I'm here working. And I don't know that they set a 10-year period where he was going to be gone, probably just like, when you coming home. I'm guessing it's more like, when you coming home. Soon. And, soon didn't come for quite a while. And then, of course, she lost her closest companion, her sister-in-law. So she sometimes shares her feelings of loss and loneliness and self-doubt in her writings. You'll find that. Perhaps, I think, more often, and maybe it's what we see particularly, is how she found meaning and comfort and joy in the Buddhist teachings, and also in the rhythms of nature. I'd like to share one of Lady Kujo's short essays, very short, that illustrate some of the characteristics of her writing. Another sample here. It says, "Writing in the sand. I stand on the beach and gaze upon the waves breaking on the shore. The waves roll in and out at fixed intervals without a moment's pause. The sea rocks itself in nature's cradle. In the whispering voice of the water as it touches the shore, we can hear the stirring of our own hearts. A sandcastle built on the shore is completely engulfed by a wave. It recedes, melting the tower. Soon all signs of the castle have been erased. Human inspiration, effort, and fame are like letters written continuously in the sand. And all of those, too, will surely disappear. Meanwhile, the waves continue their playful game of washing everything away, and no one ever tires of it." So, we're also honoring another lady who was instrumental in maintaining the Women's Association. And the Women's Association was always important as in supporting women's goals for women in Japanese society, I think. Education in particular, as I was talking about earlier. They were providing a lot of financial backing toward trying to create educational institutions. After the Second World War, the Jodo Shinshu Sangha was working to return temple activities to a new normal. The Buddhist women's associations everywhere needed to be revitalized in the post-war period. It had already become the tradition for the Monshu's wife to be the nominal leader of the Fujinkai, the BWA. You recall, Kazuko was the first president of the BWA, and Takeko took over when she passed away. Takeko's brother Kozui had resigned from the position of Monshu, so he's out, and that's an interesting story, but for another time. And he resigned, and their nephew, Kosho Ohtani, succeeded him. So we have the nephew of the Monshu coming in to take the post. So his wife, Lady Yoshiko Ohtani, took on the role of honorary president of the Buddhist Women's Association. She traveled extensively in Japan and to the overseas temples to encourage the invigoration of the women's associations. Lady Yoshiko Ohtani and her husband embarked on a major tour of North American temples at the end of 1951 and early 1952. An organized meeting of all U.S. chapters was held in San Francisco, attended by Lady Ohtani. Then they toured temples in the U.S., Hawaii, and Canada. In this picture here, Lady Ohtani and the Monshu visit in California. She's dressed impeccably, and through apparently a lot of scaffolding. I don't know if they were repairing the temple or what this was. I'm not sure, can't remember where it was in California, but it is down south. But also included in the tour was Oregon Buddhist Temple, and I think that was Oregon Buddhist Church at the time. Here Lady Ohtani visits Portland, and I think that's probably in the old temple building in the back room. Maybe a few of you are old enough to remember what it looked like and could confirm that. I wonder what it must have felt like to have visited the U.S. so soon after the war, after the cessation of hostilities. I'm sure she was, warmly received along with the Monshu and their entourage at the temples by the various sanghas, but I think it must have required a little bit of courage and commitment to undertake such a tour in America at that time. It's only like 6.5 years after the end of the war. And there's a large group picture with her and the Monshu that was taken at the old temple, and you'll find that downstairs if you are looking as you come down the stairs and along by the restrooms, you'll see it. It's a big picture that where they're sitting with the Sangha. She made a number of other trips to temples in the U.S. and Canada in successive years. That was the first batch, but there were many more to temples around in the world. Lady Ohtani also made her own literary, and here she is, I think over in, I think this was over on the East Coast, in New Jersey. In any case, lots of pictures. But she also she researched and wrote about Eshini, including this book in our temple. This is the English version, it's in our temple library, called The Life of Eshini, Wife of Shinran Shonin. And you're probably familiar, many of you, with the fact that in 1921, letters written by Eshini in the 13th century were found in the archives of the Hongwanji. These provided the first historic evidence of the identity of the wife of our founder, Shinran, rather than legends. And she talks about that quite a bit in the book. How, before these letters, there were lots of stories about princesses and stuff. And then finally, there was some historic evidence about a real flesh and blood woman who served as wife to Shinran, and who had an independent existence, raised the family when he was off teaching and so on, and then went back to the west, the Niigata area, now the Niigata area, to care for properties, an estate there. So in this book, Lady Ohtani describes a journey that she made, trying to trace the life and movement of Eshini. She based this journey of discovery on those 10 letters, which she includes in the book, and on the life of Shinran and the history and culture of the time. As she writes in her book, I decided to visit the areas intimately connected with Eshini's life, feel the earth on which she walked, and confirm once again the natural landscape and ambiance which had been integral parts of her remarkable existence. And this is a pagoda that people believe is probably the one that Eshini refers to in a couple of her letters. She wanted to have a memorial pagoda created and carved, and we know that she did. It's believed that this is the one, probably. It looks about that old. I think it looks like it might be 800 years old. Lady Ohtani was born Yoshiko Tokukaiji in 1918. She was the daughter of a nobleman. She received an excellent and rather exclusive education and attended Gaku Shuin Women's College in Tokyo. She married Monshu Koso Ohtani in 1937, and that was reported in the London and New York Times. It was news with pretty pictures of a very elaborate wedding. They had 4 children, 3 daughters and a son, Koshin, who succeeded his father as Gomonshu. And many of us remember when he was Monshu. He's still alive. And the current Monshu is her grandson. She died in the year 2000 at the age of 82. My mirror clouds quite easily. Though I warm it, it still does not capture my true self. Namo Buddhist. Namo Buddhist.